Want to thank everyone for coming. Sorry I was late. I literally ran from the Appropriations Subcommittee meeting, but we all do that from time to time, I'm sure. As we open it up, Senator Halpern, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
As we gather here today, please be on our hearts and minds, that we may remember the work that we are to do is for others, that we put others in front of ourselves, and that we remember that we are here to do the work for the people of all of the state of Georgia, and that our actions that we take here today will have implications and will affect people beyond just ourselves. All these things we pray in your name. Amen.
Thank you. All right. We have a couple of bills today, and one of the bills is mine, and one of the bills is our illustrious Rules Committee Chairman, and so I'll go ahead and take this opportunity to present Senate Bill 20. And does everyone have that in their folder? And do you also have the research office? Okay, just want to make sure you have that too. This committee is a simple bill. It comes by way of the Lieutenant Governor's office and asked me to carry it. The Child Advocate Advisory Committee currently has 7 members, and the memberships include everyone from representative from nonprofit children agency, one representative for a for-profit children agency, one pediatrician, one social worker, one psychologist, one attorney from a children and the courts, and a committee on the state bar of Georgia, and one juvenile court judge. This bill simply adds 3 new members, and this is to make sure that our foster children are not being left behind in all this. And it includes 3 new members, one being a current or former foster parent, one former foster child who reached the age of maturity or graduated from high school while still in the Georgia foster care system, and one individual who has served for the last 3 years as a court-appointed special advocate. These members would also be appointed also by the governor, one by the governor, one by the lieutenant governor, and one by the Speaker of the House. It's a good bill just to make sure that that our foster kids are not being left behind in the process, and we are considering those when it comes to child advocacy. So I'll open it up to anybody who has any questions.
Every time I make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
You may make such a motion.
Well, I moved you pass Senate Bill 20.
Second. Who was that second?
Senator Sims.
We have Senator Sims at seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Any opposed, like sign? And it passes unanimously. Thank you. And our next bill we're taking up is Senate Bill 42. Mr. Chairman, if you please come to the microphone.
Well, I didn't know if you even knew I was here. I was behind the pole. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's such a pleasure to come before such a elite group of senators, and I'm honored to be before you today. I know the Education Committee does things to help improve our student life and our teacher life and try to make our students better educated, so thank you for that. I'm proud to bring you Senate Bill 42. The purpose of this bill is to improve the efficiency and accuracy of discipline in our schools, which will allow teachers to better report behavior issues in a classroom. Now, all that sounds good, and we know that things happen that may not be reported sometimes. And the attitude is that part of the the schools and teachers review is calculated with the amount of discipline problems that they have, which in turn sometimes they don't report those, perhaps some schools, some administrators, because it looks bad on the school. Well, this bill takes out the requirement to report that, so that we believe more discipline actions will be taken to help the teacher, to help untie their hands and allow the administrators to actually discipline students that are in problematic arenas. Now, I'll give you this example. Let's say that a fight breaks out at school. Well, to make the records look good and to make the money better, the administrators may just classify that as a pushing and shoving instead of what it actually is. And discipline actions may not be as strong as maybe they should have been. We believe that this bill will change that. And also, it will help improve student behavior or the school climate by allowing them the ability to actually discipline the student. Yes, sir. Go ahead. We can do it as we go. Well, you raise your hand. I like you. We can talk.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm the chairman, for the esteemed chairman of rules. Let's say I'm a concerned parent.
Yes, sir.
Looking at schools in my neighborhood or in my region, looking for a quality school, and they're not reporting fights that break out. That might cloud my judgment on whether or not this may be a good school for my child or not. So if we take that out, I like.
Well, let me tell you, the answer to that is going to be so simple. I want to invite Deanna Harris with educators first to come up here and help me with that answer.
It is. So the data is still going to be reported. It just won't be included in the scoring of the CCRPI index. So it's not that the reports, they would call it a behavior report, from the teacher to the administrator, like assistant principal or principal. It'll still be reported. It'll still have, the information available to the community members and parents, but it will not be included in the scoring for, it's called College and Career Ready Performance Index. So it just won't be it won't be included in the scoring for that school, but it'll still be available to see.
And let me also say, the educators and administrators and superintendents and principals that I've talked to want this. Now, I haven't talked to everybody by no means, but in my area, they want this because they want to make sure that the teacher feels more easy about discipline by sending it to them and actually discipline the student instead of not discipline them, so it won't be an official part of the record. Now, it's still part of the record, but it doesn't go on their scoring for their College Career Readiness Performance Index or the STAR program. And that has hindered a lot of schools from focusing on what they need to by educating the child. And, of course, it also unties the teacher's hands, which has always been a problem with all the regulations that we have, that they're not able to teach like they were when you and I were in school. So hopefully this will improve that status.
Six or one. Yeah, I guess I am one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Mullis, for your
Yes, sir. Mr.
wisdom and all you bring to this committee when you come. Yeah, you. No, so there are a little concerns that have come up from the foster community on if we do this, and maybe we need to
Sure.
Bring her back up.
Okay.
And I'm just going to kind of read one of the concerns here. Is it says the way a school engages and addresses school discipline impacts the school climate. Removing it from the climate rating for a school means there is little accountability for the impact of discipline by a school. The children more dramatically impacted and more often impacted by school discipline are those already negatively impacted by systemic concerns, as in the case of foster children.
Well, we don't really believe that they're actually disciplining the student. They're dismissing it to keep their score down. It's what we're seeing. And by not allowing it to be a part of their scoring, we think the discipline will actually happen in a more strategic and a more traditional manner.
So but it's still going to be public record?
Sure, but it's not a part of their scoring of the school. But it is part of the record in case a parent wants to see it, somebody moving in the community to see how the school is. But we think that it will improve discipline in the school. And again, for the teacher to send it to the administrator, we believe that it, again, unties the teacher's hands and allows them to teach, which has always been a struggle with all the regulations out there.
Okay. I'll be back.
Number 7, Senator Parent.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So it seems to me that this is sort of like a complex issue, really. Sort of a societally complex issue, because I'm sort of, as we hear the discussion, I'm identifying several layers. Like first there's the layer of if folks are not disciplining because they're afraid of the score, or disciplining but not reporting, both of which I would view as, problematic and
Yeah, right.
unintended consequence of this provision of the law. But what I'm interested in your response to is the reason that these things started to be collected in the first place is there's a lot of research and data that the way discipline is done and the culture around discipline in a school really has a lot of importance. And severe discipline, like being suspended and excluded, really has serious ramifications, at least per the research, on that kid as they move towards adulthood. So I see us addressing one thing, but I guess I'm curious your thoughts on what about the other layer of it, why it's there in the first place for the things that we hope to achieve by having some of this data, or by having some of it, people accountable for some of this data.
Yeah, and the data again is still available, but it doesn't count for their scoring of the school, and we're trying to improve the school and allowing them to discipline actually instead of not disciplining because it affects their scores, or not commenting because it addresses their score. We want them to discipline the children when they need to.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Well, so yes, I absolutely hear you. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's just a lot of research that certain types of discipline are really cause problems. So do we want to totally say all types of discipline are totally fine? I mean, I guess that's sort of.
Well,
policy
we weren't
question
going
in
into
front of us.
fine detail of telling the administrator of how to do what or what to do. We wanted them to do it because, look, my area is different from your area, and I'm sure the administrators and principals would be doing things a little differently. Now, I doubt it would be as severe as Lean on Me, the movie, which I think it actually needs to happen, but that's not the way it is anymore, is it? Right, Senator Jackson? Sorry, but and let me say, once I made a paddle for one of my teachers, and later on that year, I got to feel the results of that gift. So, and, back then, that was often the case, and it's not the way it is.
Probably more than one occasion.
Yes.
Senator Dalzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here. This may be a question for Ms. Harris. Can you help us understand what role the current data on environmental and behavior indicators, which I guess is number one that we're striking here, and the data on student behavior and school-based reactions, what role that currently plays in the CCRPI scoring?
Okay, so I guess maybe I can, if I can describe it a little bit, the best way that I know how, I can probably answer some of the questions that you both had. So from what I know on both sides of on both sides, thinking more so for one school who is a high magnet school, does really well, #1 in the state. If they're not, if Johnny goes to the office 5 times and the AP sends him back continuously, does nothing about these discipline referrals that the teacher gives, and he just throws them under the desk, that's one side of the situation. Other side of the situation where we're in a more urban community, some schools that are challenged like APS. So these areas where we may have African American students, foster students who may be targeted per se, and they are not, having the same, their behavior issues are a little bit different than a student who lives in Buckhead or somewhere else. So This same bill, with deleting the data from being included in the scoring process, can help both sides of that situation, because it allows. I don't think that this is the all-in-all solution to how we discipline our kids in all of our public schools at all. This is a first step to being able to get the Board of Education, the Department of Education, and the professional standards as well to all join together and work together on figuring out what's the best option, including counseling, which needs to be administered in a number of different schools for students, especially during these times, which are so difficult. So that allows people to be able to explore options when it comes to discipline, versus just kind of, throwing it under the desk or just doing what they see as an immediate need with out-of-school suspensions or in-school suspensions, which are severely counted on this CCRPI scoring.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, and I don't know how this works, but hypothetically, if CCRPI is a score of 1 through 100, what percentage does this behavioral piece play into the scoring calculation?
Well, the exact percentage, I'd have to get that data for you to let you know. But it does play a major part into the total. But it's a 5-star system, so it goes from 5 stars, which would be excellent, to 1 star, which would be unsatisfactory, similar to like evaluations for educators and administration as well.
So that's what we're seeing here at the bottom of this. The existing language is stars 1 through 5, and looks like it's coupling financial efficiency with this behavioral index.
That is correct.
And those are the only 2 things that go into that.
That is correct.
Score. Okay. Did you like that?
No, I got it.
Senator Sims.
Thank you. I was trying to help someone with their utilities. I hope the Department of Labor is hearing that also. It's frustrating. When we talk about disciplining the students, am I here, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to shift the responsibilities, or we're not, accountability begins with the building principal, APs if they have them, and the teachers as well. But what I have problems with is, I think Senator Parent mentioned a couple of things about reporting, not reporting. I have trouble with those schools that do not report at all. They just kind of say, okay, we have these discipline problems, but we're not going to share because we don't want our CCPR scores to look bad.
Right.
So that is also an issue. There are many schools in the state, and I dare say many, I will say that, that will not report the discipline. And I'm not saying that the more we get into the weeds of this bill, I don't know if I like it or not.
Yeah, but you're heading the right way, so keep
Well,
going.
whatever. But that's a problem too, because they do not want to be punished by the public with these bad scores. It hurts with the growth of that district, the economy, those kinds of things. And I don't know if this is going to fix the problem. I don't know if this is going to fix the problem.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I know the impact that Senator Sims has on issues of this, because she's lived it. She's been a part of it. So I'm open-minded to move this forward, because what Senator Sims said at the beginning is exactly true, as well as Senator Dolezal too. So how do we get to a good solution here? And I think that we're heading in the right direction. Because by not reporting them, you lose the discipline, but by not requiring it for the College Career Readiness Performance Index, we believe that you'll get more disciplined appropriately to make sure the schools is a safer place to learn. And again, by letting the leadership do the discipline, it unties the teacher's hands and they can teach again.
Well, you may have never heard this before, but I was once a juvenile probation officer.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. It's kind of like being a federal prosecutor.
And I was there when literally, and is it not true that, you know, when alternative schools were created, it was a lot of to fix this very same reason. They were taking these poor performing kids and these underperforming kids, and most often it was no coincidence that all my probation kids were all at one school. I mean, because they had been moved over to the alternative school,
Yeah.
and because of that, and I think a lot of that is because they wanted to get those. They were trying to move those so they would not hurt the high schools as far as their scoring and their performance and how they were scored. I think this is a good bill. Because I think it literally allows us to take a different approach to where we're not just it helps the kid that's in the poor performing school that literally can still. That school's still going to benefit even though they have behavioral problems in that school. That's really no plan of the community or no school system. They can't help that some schools are just going to have kids that are behavioral problems and that comes back to hurt the schools. If we take that away, then those kids can a lot of times just stay in the high school where they're at or the middle school where they're at instead of creating another alternative for them to have to move to, so that we're moving things around. So I like the bill and I plan to support it. Mr. Chairman, what number are you? Number 9?
VR 549.
VR 5. Go ahead, sir.
We do have a huge problem in our schools on discipline. There's no two ways about that. And I think it's probably the 90-10 rule or the 10-90 rule, whichever way you want to call it. Probably 10% of the students create 90% of the problems. And touring around in the school for the last 8 years, it's clear. I mean, when you ask teachers what's the biggest problem, what's the biggest challenge you face in the public schools, they'll tell you it's discipline in the vast majority of the schools that you visit in. This is not an attack on charter schools, but I'll say that there is a distinct difference in charter schools and public schools, because charter schools do have the ability to dismiss kids from their enrollment. Public schools do not have that ability to do that, and it materially affects the ability to enact discipline. In the years that I've watched education, I think it's clear that the discipline structure that a person develops is not going to be set and settled in school. It's set and settled at home. It manifests itself in school. And if you have a child that comes to school that's never been disciplined, that child's going to be a problem in that class in all probability. So this is a problem. I've heard many teachers tell me that they've been told do not report discipline problems to the office because they don't want to deal with it, because when it goes to the office it's recorded and there's it counts against the school. And so the administrators tell the teacher, you handle it in class. Well, there again, it's a 90-10 rule. If that teacher is spending 60% of her time dealing with three students in the school that are chronic discipline problems, you've got 20-something other kids in the class whose education is suffering drastically. I'm in the position I could argue either side of the bill because I think both sides of the bill are right. And I don't know what the solution is. I think we need to free teachers' hands to where they can make discipline, to have a discipline referral of a student to administration to deal with. And I think then the dealing with that student should be in accordance with the disciplinary guidelines and the students published in the student handbook that reflect the county and the school's policies. So I mean, we've got to have discipline. If you have any society that doesn't have discipline, you're gonna have anarchy and mayhem and chaos. So I think whatever situation we have, we need to have an honest recording and an honest reporting of discipline in our schools. one thing we need to do, and we accomplish this somewhat through our longitudinal data service. We have the ability to track student discipline, the individual student discipline. I had a long conversation today with folks in DOE that look after that, and I really think in the light of today's discussions that are going on, we probably need to enhance what we report, because there's a great deal of difference in a chronic discipline, a student who's a chronic discipline problem, and a student who generally behaves themselves that may find themselves in the middle of an altercation. I don't know how y'all were raised. I was raised, my daddy told me, he said, son, if you ever start a fight in school and I hear about it, I'm going to whip your tail. But if you ever run from one in school, I'm going to whip your tail. You know, and it was a kind of situation that, you know, you don't start a problem, but if somebody comes up and starts beating in your face, you don't stand there and let them beat the snot out of you. You've got a right, we have a right to defend ourselves, and I think our reporting structure needs to reflect the differences and the degrees in this. When I was on the school board, I had a principal call me one time, and we had a very strict zero tolerance policy on weapons in school. Principal called me one time, and I was on school board and happened to be chairman that year, and he said, I've got a problem. I said, what is it? He said, I got a little girl in the 7th grade. She said she brought a piece of fruit to school today and brought a paring knife, had a blade on it somewhere between 1.5 inches and 2 inches long. Brought it in her lunch sack. She got out and started peeling her fruit. The teacher saw it in the lunchroom, carried her to the office. And he said, what do you want me to do? Well, he prefaced that, and he said, you know what our discipline policy is. He said, she's going to be suspended for 2 weeks. And it's a zero tolerance policy. Okay? And he said, what do you want me to do? And I asked him, I said, have you ever had any problem with a kid before in any way, in any kind of discipline issue? He said, no. He said, now, she hadn't been here a long time, but he said, she's one of the most agreeable kids you'll ever see. He told me, he said her father, I think, worked for the State Department or something, and I think they had just come from some kind of an overseas assignment. Said, you know, it was in the student handbook, but he said, I said, was there any intent of malice? Has she ever been involved in any kind of altercation with another student? He said, no. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to put her back in class, and I don't want you to say anything about it. I said, I realize I'm telling you to break county policy, but I said, if you get hammered on it, you just tell them I told you to do it, because this doesn't make sense to hold this kid home for 2 weeks suspended. I said, and if she brings it again, you know, your hands are going to be tied. But discipline's common sense, and you've got to, not every student is the same. No two students are the same, and you have to weigh these situations. This is a inflammatory issue, because I know there's been issues raised about one race is disciplined more harshly or harder than the other. That may or may not be true. My answer has always been, you have a discipline policy. You report the incidents of discipline, and you deal with them accordingly. So in doing that, you document every case. You document what the student's role in it was. And if you've got a student that's in a fight every 3 weeks, they need to be under discipline. The problem needs to be more harsh than somebody who's never given a problem before. Just like when you go in court and you have a breaking of the law, you get first offender treatment. That's a common sense way to handle discipline. I will say this, you know, initially, and I still don't know what the perfect answer on this is. I don't think a school ought to be punished, and more than that, I don't think teachers and students need to be punished by a kid being made to stay in a classroom and continue to misbehave chronically because the administration doesn't want to report it on their school records, and it affects their school climate negatively, and in turn they feel like it'll affect their community negatively. But I think we absolutely have an imperative mandate to record discipline in a way that reflects all of the characteristics of the individual incident. So if anybody ever questions why that student was disciplined in the way they can, you can document it, and you can show that there's no partiality given to anyone for any reason. Not necessarily because of race, but I mean, you know, if their daddy's a county commissioner or somebody else and they let them get off scot-free for the same offense, that you suspend another kid for 2 weeks, that's wrong. I don't care who you are. And I think that's the reason we have to have good documenting and reporting and recording of it. I think what we have needs to be, all of that needs to be available to the public, disaggregated by school and by district. It needs to be available, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part. I mean, if it'll bring better discipline in the schools to not make it a part of the climate survey or the climate rating, I'll be in favor of it. But it's something we need to monitor because discipline needs to get better in school. We're in a chronic situation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what the chairman says, and of course, his experience as school board for many years and never taking a salary also talks about his determination to improve education. But I agree, we want it to be recorded. We just want to be a part of determining the school's climate determination. But we still want it to be reported, but to take it out of that determination so that the college career readiness performance index is not affected. But the discipline hopefully will get even better there.
Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Mullis, I think this is a great bill, and I think a lot of people brought up some good points here. I would recommend that this body consider doing a study committee this summer as it relates to how we're doing discipline in schools and perhaps bring legislation back in the 2021-22 session. But in the meantime, I think what Chairman Mullis put together here is a very good bill that says let's not muddy the water with two things that don't necessarily have to come together. In this case, you're looking at this index where you might buy a house, you might build a house, what you want to do with your children, and having a couple of kids might be misbehaving, might be skewing that and causing unnecessary harm. So when it's the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to pass this bill.
Okay. Maybe one of that. Senator Bress.
All right. I do have a little heartburn over lines 25 and 26. So we're saying in the school survey that school climate determination shall not include student discipline data. And to me, if we're gonna, I mean, I don't know how you, to me, just, it seems like discipline is a big part of the climate of a school. And I mean, I am having a little bit of a tough time separating the two. But in a survey, I've got 2 kids in grade school. If I'm sending my kids to school and they're having discipline issues, or there's a lot of discipline issues in that school, and then I'm supposed to on a survey rank the climate of that school, but yet that's the only problem I have with that climate is the discipline. But yet that's not going to be able to be included. That part I do have
in the climate, but you're still
serious heartburn over that.
You still have access to the data. The data will still be there for if you ask for it. And the Department of Education will be monitoring this. They've already been monitoring the discipline, so it will be targeted a little better this way. And you'll see more discipline too. It's just not a part of their evaluation in that regard, but the discipline information and data will still be there for you as a parent, community leader, or interested in that particular school.
All right.
Senator Sims.
She just got a call.
Senator Jackson.
Chairman, have the GAE and weighed in on this
I
legislation?
haven't heard from them in several years, actually, on any bill.
That's good then. Thank you, sir. That's all I need.
But Educators First have been in discussion over many issues. So my hats are off to them.
Thank you, sir.
They're working with parents and students.
Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Saw some heads nodding, and I'm sort of in agreement with Chairman Tippins when he said he could argue either side of this bill. I kind of feel the same way. So the question I kind of have is for really Chairman Tippins and Senator Sims, who have so much experience in this area. Do you think we could craft something that addressed the one problem without creating other problems?
I don't know, that's the dilemma.
Yeah, because that's what I'm seeing.
We've got to have better discipline alternatives than we have today, and we don't need something that's a disincentive to deal with disruptive students. But what that is, I don't know. I don't know.
And again, Mr. Chairman, the Department of Education is monitoring this and will collect the data from all the schools too. It will be available for everybody. We just don't want it to be a part of the determination of that school.
Will it be available in the communities on the time of the
We can make sure it does.
So if somebody
Sure.
calls
Yeah.
in a particular area.
Transparency is the word of the decade, isn't it?
I would say this, is the
Do you have a question?
is to define in this bill as we change it, what will be available, where it will be available, and when it will be available. Because if the information is available to anybody in the public that wants to make an inquiry on it, then basically it's in the marketplace. Most people that look at the school climate rating, they're not gonna get into the weeds to see how it was determined in. They're just gonna say it's a failing school, or it's a 3 and everything else is a 4 around it. So most people that look at that data, they don't ever get to the point they're looking at it.
Yeah, we'd be amenable to that, Mr. Chairman. You know, if it's written properly, we'd be good with that.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. Does anyone, any other discussion?
I've got a question. Mr. Chairman, would you prefer try to perfect that bill here, or would you be agreeable to tabling it and bringing it back at the next meeting with proposed language that's been?
When is your next meeting?
Wednesday.
Like this Wednesday? Sold. Yeah, if all of you who are interested in, you know, let's be realistic, but absolutely some transparency on that issue, I'll be fine with. For locally, and then for the department also to have a rating list perhaps. Not rating, but their discipline issues. Just don't want to be a part of their determination again.
Okay.
Hopefully that would improve the discipline at schools and untie the teachers' hands, as I keep saying.
So you would have no problem doing?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I'd be good this Wednesday. Is that okay, everybody?
Senator Inverparty?
No, only comment I have to make is, I mean, teachers are sick and tired of doing these surveys, and I think we need to do whatever we're going to do to make sure that we're not, it's kind of what you said, Senator Mullis. I think not just freeing their hands, but we're doing what's best interest of the child. I mean, at the end of the day, the data point ain't going to change the situation for the child. I mean, if I'm a home buyer or whatever, I'm going to do my homework, and I'm going to know what that data is. But at the end of the day, let's not penalize schools and hold them back.
That's right.
Over a data point, but let's make sure that we're building a foundation where that school is going to be successful on the back end if we're going to do this. So that's my only comment.
If we had to delay a little bit to perfect the bill, I'm good with that.
Senator Sims?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for having to step out. As Senator Tippins said, one of the first responses from teachers when you ask what are the problems, they will say discipline. But a lot of that is because there's weak leadership in that building. Okay? The principal is the person responsible, of course, the classroom. The teacher has to be freed up so he or she can teach. So when you send that child for disciplinary actions to the office, to send them back to the classroom is a slap in the face without any kind of disciplinary actions or whatever, consequences, wrong word. So we need to make sure that the leaders that we place in school buildings understand that the teacher cannot, the classroom teacher cannot do this by themselves. They need to have strong leadership. And as citizens of the state of Georgia and taxpayers, we need to understand that and stop placing in these schools weak leaders that it's not that they don't want to report it. They just don't want to be bothered, a lot of them. So that's my 101 lesson for education today, okay?
Are there any other questions? Okay, at this time, I guess I'll take.
Hey, and let me say one more thing. I know this doesn't solve the problem, but I think it starts to solve the problem. And with your help, we can do that. And thank you, Senator Sims, too, for that. Because I think it helps the administrators, too, to know what to do instead of, do I need to report this, or do I not, or do I need to let it go so I don't have to report it? You'll have a clear policy after they don't have to use it for their determination.
And this is, and in the language that you changed, that's literally just regarding the data.
Yeah, to make sure it's available.
It's not a decision if we are disciplining kids and we're not disciplining kids. It's just what we're doing. If that data is going to be
We're going to make it transparent.
held over that school.
Yeah.
As far as
That's what I understand.
reported.
We're going to make it transparent, where locally it's reported and also school system, Department of Education.
Same way, it should be more accurate. The difference is it's not going to be taken into the computation of the student climate survey rating.
correct. All right, now we'll move. What was the will of the committee?
Back to the committee at the earliest possible date.
I have a motion to table. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Senator Parent. Any discussion?
I thought the agreement was for Wednesday. That got changed, does it matter?
You can't time-bind the motion.
You can't timeline it.
It's okay.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of tabling this, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? Looks like it passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We will table this, and I will do
I
my
look
best.
forward to working with the members to.
If you'll get
Again.
with me and let me know, what, me and my vice chairman, let us know what we're doing and what you've got putting together, and
thank
we'll trying to get back on the calendar for Wednesday. With no other business on the calendar, we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being here.